Alright, my mic quality's gotten better again. I'm back on my Mac. Probably for this one episode. Alright, we're going to be doing a visual test between both Godot and Unity. Now you might be thinking, bro, you cheating. You already know that's unfair. You already know Unity's going to blow Godot out of the water. You already know about that. I mean, you're right. But at the same time, not exactly. Okay, for this test, I'm mostly focusing on the visual aspect of it. This does not concern about frame rate or performance. This is not a more performance test when it comes to the graphical fidelity of both engines. It's more or less what I can do within the prospects of being both lightweight and using OpenGL ES3. OpenGL ES3 is a graphics framework that both Unity and the current version that I have is Godot 3.2.3. And we're going to be using those versions of both engines. I didn't specify what version of Unity I'm using, but it's mostly going to be probably 2019 because that's the one I mainly use on my current computer. But this episode, we're focusing mainly on Godot. So, what scene are we testing out?
Red alert. Here we go again.
This is a downtown plaza that I worked on for the past 2 months ever since I made that Godot video. And the concept I went with this is a PS2 slash GameCube slash Dreamcast-esque environment, low poly but high in detail. That was the main concept that I was going for. And I felt like with this being very mobile friendly in a way, I feel like this would be the best example to show off what these two engines are capable of when it comes to like rendering out this scene compared to it being rendered in Blender. A key detail when I'm exporting this out, other than how low poly this is that the texture density for majority of these textures is at least 2K. So bear in mind these textures are a bit large and it's may have some issues when exporting to these editors, and I'll tell you about that later. But at the same time, you get the most decent quality out of them. You get the most pristine quality, even though it's not 4K, but for anything that's going to be like running on a mobile device and it can be compressed later, I have a good feeling that this is the most pristine you'll probably get without compression. What you see here is a frozen scene in Godot, and it's frozen for one reason, and that's just because of how Blender exported my scene out to the software. Probably because the texture is too large, but even so, it still crashed, and some of my files got corrupted. So I re-exported it to Godot, and here we go. Looking at this, some of my stuff ported over, but not all of them correctly. I mean, you see in the trees, alpha texturing didn't survive, so I gotta go redo some of the materials, and that's one of the good things when I had this exported out to Godot. So I can just go into the material and just like edit it itself within the editor. So most of the stuff had to be like redone or re-exported due to me using Photoshop files. Don't know why I just use raw Photoshop files when I could just export it to PNG from some of them, but some of them did require for me to re-export them as PNG files. But overall, some of them, like normal mapping and specular highlights, that did transfer over for their maps, because I know I exported those out as PNGs rather than Photoshop files. One big issue that I wanted to address when I was exporting, why was my models not coming out one to one like how it did in Blender? Unfortunately, my footage did cut out when I was trying to transition to show the differences, but I can tell you that when I was doing my mall building, my small local mall building, on the edges where the concrete is supposed to be within the tiles, it was all supposed to be full concrete, not concrete and some leftovers of the UV map or whatever textures that I had already on there. This does not happen in Blender. This is a Godot issue that I managed to figure out, and I'm not sure if this is more of an exporting deal or if this might be a rendering issue. But since they're on the sides, I'll overlook this. Now, after a couple hours, it's starting to look nice. I redid my materials, I redid my textures just so they work in the engine, and you still see there's some rendering issues still there, and I'm getting kind of upset about that, but hey, majority of the stuff managed to transfer over quite nicely. So I did a little bit of touching up by adding a little bit of post-processing, and what I did was add a little bit of bloom and a little bit of HDR, and it turned out decent. Except for the fact that there was a boatload of color banding, and luckily this is fixed in a newer version of it, but I'm using an older version, 3.2, and I think most folks who was working with any 3D rendering kind of experienced this issue, so that's one of the biggest faults about it. So, after all that work that I managed to put in, and I managed to port it over to Godot, how successful was I? Well, let's just say I did pretty decent. Even though I did run into some issues when it came to just standard model rendering or color banding, for a lightweight program like this, a lightweight game engine that is open source and free, running on OpenGL ES3, this is something pretty. This is pretty nice for something that you're able to get for an open source program. With the shine in the main area where the stop signs is at, and with a little small park that I had made by the, I don't know what to say. This is just a pretty good map that I managed to make, even though I probably should have dumbed it down to 1K textures, but I feel like with the most clarity with this, I did do a nice job using 2K textures with this. But overall, this is a pretty nice demo that I managed to put together for this engine. And this might be a decent showcase for it too. But I feel like whenever Vulkan drops for Godot 4, I feel like this might take it to another level, but I feel like it won't do too much anyway, because the main goal for this is to show out both how low poly and high amount of detail go together, similar to how like the PS2 and Xbox era of games usually kind of work with their philosophy in a way. So, what's my conclusion on this? Well, I can't fully make a conclusion yet because I gotta do Unity's version. So stay tuned for part 2 whenever I feel like dropping that. So stay tuned, and thank you all for watching.